Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents When the Dead Come Home by B.L. Brunnemer. Narrated by Elizabeth Hart and Nelson Hobbs. Chapter 1. Saturday. I let the tattoo shop door close behind me as I rushed across the parking lot. Asher was back. Smiling, I climbed into my blazer and slammed the door shut. Last month, Asher had his first shift into a werewolf. Since then, he'd been at Astrid's house so she could mentor him through it. His entire life and body had changed. He needed to relearn everything about himself. No one had really seen him since. I started the car and peeled out of the parking lot while practically bouncing in my seat. There had been some calls and Skype, but that didn't cut it when you'd just started dating one of your best friends, especially when you'd been crushing on for months, as well as crushing on and dating his 4 best friends. Yeah, it was complicated. Things were still new for all of us. My pulse beat in my throat as I pulled onto his street. Butterflies took off as I parked, shut off the car, and ran for the front porch. Not bothering to knock, I simply shoved open the white door. Asher was walking out of the kitchen doorway as he lowered and tapped the screen on his phone. Those ocean eyes met mine. Everything stopped. His sandy blonde hair was shorter than it had been a month ago. The bags under his eyes were gone now. His face, that boy next door kind of handsome. Wide shoulders, and that almost extra foot of height on me. I took it all in a heartbeat while never pulling my gaze from his. A smile spread across his face, lighting him up as I ran to him. He came toward me, dropping the phone to the floor before he caught me in the air. I wrapped my arms around his neck as he held me tight in his. Warmth and happiness bubbled through me as I wrapped my legs around his waist. I took a deep, shaky breath of vanilla and cinnamon. Something inside me settled. Asher was home. Just like that, a month of not seeing him was gone as if it never existed. Light rolled through me as his face buried in the crook of my neck, while he took his own deep breaths. A low growl rumbled in his chest, vibrating through me. I smiled against his skin. His wolf was happy to see me too, I think. Was that a good noise or a bad one? I whispered against his throat. He lifted his head, his nose trailing up my skin to my cheek.
Allie.
His deeper voice sent a shiver of heat through me. I met his eyes. The light and dark blue now had a thread of silver weaving through them. Definitely a good noise. I pulled myself higher, bringing my lips up to his. His lips moved with mine. Heat pooled as he kissed me harder, sweeping in and taking control. Thought long gone, I kissed him just as eagerly. The need to touch and be touched was almost a hunger. An entire month without seeing him, touching him, without that vanilla and cinnamon scent. He lowered me onto something soft before moving over me, his hand sliding up the outside of my thigh, leaving want behind. Our breathing grew heavier as I slipped my hands under his shirt to touch scorching skin.
Damn, Allie. I missed you.
My body clenched at the roughness in his voice. Missed you too. His lips began kissing down my neck again, his fingers pulling the loose V-neck of my slouchy shirt down until the valley between my breasts was exposed. His lips and tongue traced down my breastbone to bury between them. My fingers dug into his hair as my entire body went up in flames. His lips found the curve of my breast. My head fell back as a small moan slipped from my throat. His hand squeezed gently as his teeth pressed into my flesh, shooting electricity down my nerves. My breath caught as I clung to him. At least until his teeth dug in more. Hot, sharp pain had me hissing. Ow! He didn't let up. In fact, he bit harder. Ash, that hurts. Stop. Adrenaline poured through my veins like ice water. I pushed his shoulders away, but he wasn't budging. His silver blue eyes met mine before he jerked away and hit the floor. His gaze held mine as the silver began to fade while horror moved in. Did he? I pulled my neckline down and looked at the bite. There was a perfect impression of his teeth in my skin. I wiped my fingers over it. No blood. I shifted my bra back to cover me before looking up at him as he slowly got to his feet. His face was pale as he wrapped his arms around himself and took another step back.
Did I?
No blood. I readjusted my shirt before sitting up and putting my feet on the floor. Asher moved back under the pass-through to the foyer. Ash. He shook his head.
This isn't a good idea.
We just got carried away. Astrid sent me a list of the big don'ts, and that was right up there in the top 5. I shrugged. I just really missed you. His eyes were rough when they met mine.
Maybe this isn't a good idea.
My heart dropped. It's the first time I've kissed you since my shift, and...
I almost drew blood, Allie.
I know. I gestured at my chest. It was my boob. I'm kinda attached to it. He went to say something, but instead started laughing. I smiled and relaxed a little. Ash, it's going to take time. We'll need to figure out what works for us and what doesn't. We just need to be more careful. He shook his head.
I might not have as much control as I thought.
I sent him my wicked smile. Superman, you might not have noticed, but I wasn't exactly in control either. He grinned as he stopped rubbing the back of his neck. Then his face grew somber.
If we're together, there's a big risk of you being converted. I don't know if I want to chance it.
Where is this coming from? I asked. Asher sounded like my old therapist when she wanted to bring up a subject.
Astrid said we really needed to talk about the risks of dating.
Asher shrugged.
After what just happened, we might as well talk about it now.
Okay, let's talk about it. I ran my gaze over his still tense shoulders. Are you going to sit down, or do I have to chase you? He snorted quietly as he came back into the family room. He sat down on the coffee table in front of me, his knees reaching the outside of my hips.
It is a very real risk that you might be converted, Allie,
he said, meeting my eyes.
Astrid says it happens by accident all the time.
I'm a necro, I reminded him. Are we sure I could even be converted? His grin was back.
I asked Astrid. She said she'd talk to Evelyn and get back to me with an answer.
I smiled. Asher, I know the risk, but it's one I'm more than willing to take, and you can't make that choice for me.
I could kill you, Allie,
he reminded me.
I am a wolf inside. You can't trust him not to hurt you.
I don't. I met his eyes again. I trust you.
Allie.
You stopped yourself, Ash. He looked at me, doubt filling his face. I needed to make him understand. I couldn't push you away. I tried. You stopped yourself. You got yourself away from me before you broke skin. He closed his eyes and hung his head. The tension radiating through his body made my heart ache. I reached up and lifted his chin until he looked at me. I don't play games. I don't go back and forth. I love you and I want to be with you. His gaze was steady on my face, and silver slipped through the blue as my fingers dropped from his chin. My stomach nodded. Asher, do you want to be with me? His face grew softer.
You know I love you.
Do you want to be with me? His eyes were rough seas again.
Yeah.
Then we're going to have to figure it out, together. I reached over and took his hand. Running away is just going to hurt us both and make us miserable. And I don't want to do either of those things.
You're right, but no more close calls.
His fingers squeezed mine.
I know we talked, but how have you been?
I weaved my fingers with his and tried to smile. Worried about having all of you in the same room again?
Me too.
I really missed you. My voice all but cracked. He got to his feet, pulling me to mine. His arms moved around me carefully as I pressed against him. My eyes closed as I rested my cheek against his chest while he buried his nose into my hair. We simply reveled in the fact he was home and we were together again. I don't know how long we stood like that, but soon Asher was lifting his head and loosening his arms.
The twins are coming.
I let him go as he stepped back toward the pass-through just before the door burst open. Isaac hurried into the family room, all smiles. How could I describe Isaac? I smiled to myself. He was about 7 inches taller than me, his wide-built shoulders in a lime-green shirt on top of camo cargo shorts. His short hair was longer than usual, shaggy and blue, with darker blue streaks through it. His skin had darkened over the summer, bringing out his brown eyes. There was a light to Isaac that I could never really describe. His personality just shone out of his eyes, turning them into a unique amber.
Asshat.
Isaac ran into the room and tried to tackle Asher. Tried, being the operative word. Asher barely moved a muscle as Isaac's toes brushed the floor while he dangled from Asher's shoulders like an unwanted backpack. Asher chuckled and looked at him.
What are you doing?
Isaac grinned at him.
I tried knocking you on your ass, but I guess that's not going to happen anymore.
He dropped to the floor and hugged Asher around the waist.
We missed you, man.
Asher relaxed and patted his arms as Ethan came through the door. Ethan's eyes met mine and ran over me. He had been doing that more often lately, finding me in a room full of people before even seeing anyone else. Every time it sent heat rushing through me and made my pulse pick up. As Isaac's identical twin brother, they both had the same height and shoulders, the same straight nose and identical pouty lips. But that was it. Ethan tended to wear all black and combat boots, while Isaac wore whatever he wanted. Ethan's straight, black, jaw-length hair was down and tucked behind his ears. The 5 silver hoops running up his right ear flashed at me as he leaned against the pass-through doorway. Ethan's chocolate eyes were warm as they ran over my face one more time before he turned to Asher.
Hey, Asher.
Asher shoved Isaac away from him playfully before turning to Ethan. The light in his eyes dimmed. His smile faded around the edges.
Hey.
Ethan grew completely still.
Did you make any snacks yet?
Isaac called over his shoulder before he disappeared into the foyer and headed for the kitchen. Asher turned his head toward me, though he kept his gaze on Ethan.
Can you make sure he doesn't destroy my kitchen?
I snorted before heading into the foyer and following Isaac through the door. Isaac was already at the cookie jar in the sunlit room when I came in. I lifted myself to sit on the counter beside the jar and stole a few for myself. Isaac moved closer to my legs until my knees brushed his hips.
How was work?
I finished the bite of cookie in my mouth before answering. It felt long, like Christmas Eve when I was a kid. He took a bite out of my cookie.
So, what's the plan tonight?
Food, games, hanging out. I narrowed my eyes at him and pulled my cookie out of his reach. And that other thing?
Going over how the dating schedule is going to work?
He finished for me. I nodded and took another bite of cookie. His smile faded.
Red.
I let my smile drop and shrugged. Lately, it seemed Isaac was the only one I could show how worried I was. Miles was always trying to keep the guys on track and communication flowing. Ethan, and being oddly distant. Hugs had even become rare from him. Zeke had been quiet and not sleeping again. He had buried himself in the garage and work, naturally. He leaned over and brushed my nose with his.
We're not going to let anyone screw this up.
I rested my forehead against his. Even me?
Even you.
I smiled as he leaned down and brushed his lips over mine. It had been almost a month since I had kissed him. I sank into him.
Ethan. Asher waited until the kitchen door swung closed before moving between me and the others. What the hell are you? I sighed. He'd noticed. That wasn't too surprising. Remember when those witches tortured me? He nodded as he shifted to a defensive stance. They did something to me. I made a point not to move. Ranulph noticed it on the camping trip. His posture didn't change an inch. "Start talking." I lowered my voice and quickly summed up what I knew, which wasn't much. He eventually relaxed and stepped away from the door. "That isn't much to go on." I started to spin my rings. "Yeah, I know." He glanced at the kitchen door, then turned back to me. "They don't know?" "Isaac does." He shook his head. "You have to tell the others. You can't go around without knowing what kind of damage you can do." I nodded. "I know. That's why I'm telling everyone tonight. Isaac's been watching me, but he can't do it all the time." I shrugged. "So far nothing's changed. I'm not wanting to tear into anyone, nothing different. I just feel better." His brow drew down as he moved closer. He began sniffing the air around me. He moved around me slowly, smelling me like a dog. I stayed still, even when he got extremely close to my neck. He sneezed and backed off. When he was done, he shook his head. "It's subtle, but there's a scent. I noticed the change mostly in the way you walked." I raised an eyebrow. "The way I walked?" He nodded. "You moved smoother. It's something I noticed about shifters in the last month. They're more graceful is the only word I can use to describe it." Ranulph and Astrid agreed that I'm not a shifter. I raised an eyebrow. "But I smell?" He nodded, his eyes unfocusing. "There's your cologne, which, by the way, makes my nose itch. And under that, there's a hint of smoke of some kind." I shook my head. "That really didn't tell me much." "You need to be extremely careful with Allie," Asher said, drawing my attention again. "You don't know what kind of damage you could do." "I haven't even hugged her in over a week," I muttered. And I hated it. I missed touching her, seeing that happy look on her face when my fingers stroked down her back. "Good." He turned to look at the front door. "Miles is here." "He's going to interrogate you." I grinned as I started toward the kitchen. "Watch yourself," he reminded me before I pushed open the kitchen door. I really didn't need the reminder.
Lexie. Ethan walked through the kitchen door, his shoulders already tense. Isaac backed up away from me to lean against the island.
"Miles is here. He'll be having his usual 'are you okay' talk in the family room."
Ethan jumped up on the counter beside me and took a handful of cookies.
"So we have a while?"
Isaac took the last bite of the cookie in his hand. We chuckled. Asher wouldn't get to leave that couch until Miles understood everything he had to watch for with Asher as a new werewolf. "Then let's order some pizza." I pulled out my phone to call. "I'm starving."
"Don't order pizza,"
Asher shouted from the living room.
"I'll make a couple."
I went still. Asher had always had amazing hearing, but now, how far could he hear? Okay, I guess he's not pretending to not hear us anymore. I set my phone down. Is Zeke coming? The twins shared a look.
"Probably not. He's dealing with some stuff."
Ethan turned back to me.
"I thought you two were talking to each other."
I reached into the cookie jar and pulled a few more out. "We are, but I haven't seen him lately." Isaac shrugged.
"He sent Miles his schedule for school earlier this week. Miles will fill him in."
Ethan bounced his heel off the cabinet under him. The door to the kitchen opened. Miles came through the door and spied the cookies. Angled jaw, high cheekbones, and wavy brown hair. Miles was cute. His rimless rectangular glasses only made him look older and, well, yummy.
"Asher is ordering pizza,"
Miles announced as he met my gaze with warm eyes. I gave him a welcoming smile even though he'd been rather standoffish since we came back. He kept our talks light, and if I asked if he was all right, he'd change the subject. Very not the Miles I knew, but he kept refusing to talk about it.
"Wait, what?"
Isaac turned to him as the door closed. Miles pushed the glasses up his nose.
"Apparently, Jessica has been staying with friends the last few days. She's coming home in a couple of hours, and cooking would take him too long."
Well, that made sense, but Why has she been at her friend's house? The door opened as Asher came in and spotted the open cookie jar. His gaze narrowed on me.
Already at the cookies?
I smiled my wicked grin. Not me. I'm innocent. It was the twins. Asher shook his head as he came around the island and snagged the jar from us.
I don't buy that for a second.
Everyone chuckled.
Also, I don't know why she's at a friend's house.
Asher set the jar down away from us.
She stayed with us a few nights while you were gone.
Ethan turned to Asher.
She said she kept hearing weird noises outside.
Miles's brow furrowed together, creating a wrinkle. She said the same thing when she called and asked if she could sleep in Asher's room at my house. I raised an eyebrow. Jessica wanted to sleep at Miles's house? That was beyond strange. I pulled out my phone and texted Zeke. Alexis. Hey, did Jessica ask you to crash at your house while Ash was gone? It didn't take long for him to respond. Tough guy.
Yeah, 2 or 3 times a week. Sylvie ended up crashing at Asher's a few times.
I read his answer out loud, then looked up at the others.
So, between all of us, she had someone spend the night or slept elsewhere most of the month?
Miles asked, a wrinkle forming between his eyes. The twins nodded.
That's weird.
Asher rubbed the back of his neck.
I'll ask her about it tonight. So what did I miss while I was gone?
Most of the supernaturals in town have found places to live. Miles began, tapping his fingers along the counter.
Except a couple of shifter families and the vampires. DuPont is still at your house?
Asher raised an eyebrow. Miles nodded.
Spring Mountain isn't a big city like New Orleans. It's harder to buy a place or even rent one if you can't go out during the day.
Ethan shook his head.
I still don't like that he's at your house.
Miles scratched his chin.
I've already had an offer accepted on a large piece of property for them just outside of town. After it's in my name, I'll sell it to Samuel and his vampire nest for the same price. How long is that going to take?
Isaac asked before he crossed the room to the pantry and opened the door.
They'll be out this week,
Miles stated.
What have they been doing for blood all this time?
Asher asked as Isaac came back to stand next to Ethan and opened a large bag of chips. My stomach growled, reminding me it had been a while since breakfast, and those cookies weren't going to do it. Ethan took a handful of chips before he handed me the bag. Miles sighed.
They have several donors.
The room fell silent. What do you mean, donors? I asked, before pulling out a handful of chips and passing the bag to Isaac. Miles pushed his glasses up his nose.
There are some people who they pay to let them drink their blood.
I stopped chewing. Seriously? Miles nodded.
And they're in your house, too?
Isaac asked, before popping a chip into his mouth. Miles shook his head.
No, I drew the line there. They go to meet them out of town for a feed from the vein. Otherwise, they drink from a bag.
Asher eyed Miles.
You've been talking to Samuel.
Miles sent me a look.
He's a great source of information on vampires. Besides, I'm not the only one.
Asher's gaze went straight to me.
Allie, you've been hanging out with that vampire?
We've had movie nights at Miles's house in the last month that did involve Sam and a couple of his vamps. I shrugged. I've gotten to know him a little. Asher's head snapped around, his gaze darting to the kitchen door. I was about to ask what was wrong when it was pushed open. A tall, bulky figure moved through into the kitchen. Zeke was a mountain of muscle. 6'5", he towered over most of us. His wide jaw and wide cheekbones gave him a dangerous look. But in truth, Zeke was, well, Zeke, and the black scruff along his jaw did interesting things to my insides. His ice blue eyes met mine, making me smile. The corner of his lips quirked up before he moved out of the doorway and put his back against the wall.
Hey.
When I pulled my gaze from him, I finally noticed the others. Asher's eyes were a little wider. Ethan and Isaac's jaws might as well have been on the floor. Even Miles's face was blank. Not understanding, I turned back to Zeke. Hey, you. His eyes grew warm. His face softened a tiny fraction.
"Hey,"
Ethan said, his jaw lifting off the floor.
We didn't expect to see you tonight, man."
Zeke lifted his left shoulder and let it drop back down. Everyone seemed to struggle to go back to normal as Asher turned back to me.
"You haven't been alone with Samuel, have you?"
Asher asked, bringing us back to the topic. I tilted my head to the side. What are you worried about, Ash?
"I don't want any of you getting bitten."
I grinned. Neither do we. Asher's shoulders relaxed. Miles shifted, drawing my attention.
"But to answer your original question, they'll be moving out soon."
I smiled. Then you'll have your house back? Miles's eyes shifted away from me to the sink.
"Not exactly."
Asher eyed Miles.
"Let me guess. Lucy. She's still at your house?"
Miles lifted his head.
"Yes."
I went still as the guys shook their heads, almost in unison. Lucy was a genius alchemist from New Orleans. She'd lost almost everything in the fire that took the safe house. Apparently she had been living there for some time. When she had nowhere to go, Miles offered her a place to stay until she got back on her feet. That was over a month ago, and she was still in his house. And she was pretty. I started tapping the heel of my foot against the cabinet door.
"You need to give her a deadline to move out."
Ethan popped another chip in his mouth. Asher nodded.
"Otherwise, she's just going to stay there."
Miles nodded.
"I know you're right. I just feel bad. She lost everything in the fire."
"She wasn't the only one," I reminded him. Asher met my gaze as we both remembered Lewis. The necro had died in the same fire. A dark silence fell in the kitchen. It was almost palpable. I chewed on the bottom corner of my lower lip. The twins continued snacking as the awkward silence settled in the room. Miles shifted his feet while Asher cleared his throat. My shoulders grew tense just waiting for someone to say something about the elephant in the room. "So, did everyone get their class schedules?" I asked, mostly to break the silence I'd created. Everyone jumped at the topic and pulled out their schedules. By the time the pizzas arrived, I learned that I had one of them in almost every class this year. Miles answered the door while I followed Asher and Ethan into the family room with napkins. I started to go for the couch with Asher, but I hesitated. Where should I sit? Was it going to cause a problem between the guys? Isaac stepped through the family room doorway carrying paper plates. He glanced around the room before looking down at me with a glint in his eyes.
"You should snag Zeke's chair while you can."
I smiled up at him. I loved that twisted side of him. He winked at me before moving into the room and setting down the plates on the coffee table. I moved around the coffee table and sat in the armchair next to the couch and Asher. Isaac passed out the plates before sitting down in front of the TV on the floor. Zeke strolled into the room and spotted me sitting with my feet crossed under me in his usual chair. I grinned happily while he narrowed his eyes at me before taking the armchair beside mine. The scent of engine grease reached me as he settled in. My fingers itched to tangle with his. Miles brought the pizzas and set them on the coffee table. 8 pizzas? My eyebrows shot up. Why'd we order so much?
"I eat more now, remember?"
Asher answered as he opened the box on the top. Oh yeah. I leaned forward and started handing out napkins. Ethan reached out to grab a piece of pizza. A growl rumbled from Asher's chest, freezing everyone in place. Ethan raised an eyebrow and pulled his hand back. Asher's cheeks tinted pink.
"Sorry, it's a wolf thing." "All right. What do you need to get around it?"
Miles asked, his voice calm, as if this stuff happened every day. Asher grabbed his plate and hurriedly picked up several slices as his face burned red. He handed it to me without looking at me and took my empty one.
"Serve Ali first, then everyone else."
His voice was so quiet I could barely hear him. "So, I don't have to wait in line anymore for you guys and your bottomless stomachs?" I asked cheerfully. I shot a fist into the air in triumph. "Yes." The guys chuckled as Asher's face cooled down. Everyone began grabbing slices as I settled in my chair and started eating.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?